My husband, Brian, whom I always supported, was promoted to department head, but then, my best friend took him away from me. He left me and the child we raised together, betraying me just like my once trusted friend. It was the hardest time of my life, but my daughter, who was now an adult starting her career, helped me heal and move on. 2 years later, I ran into them by chance in the city. My old best friend looked at the man standing next to me and sneered, saying, "A poor-looking old man suits you well." I smiled calmly and said, "Good to see you, don't you recognize me?" She looked confused. My ex-husband rushed over, panicking. I turned to them both and said, "Let me introduce myself properly. My name is Sarah. Until 2 years ago, I was Sarah Ingram. 2 years ago, my husband, Matt, the man I married at 24 after a quick romance, asked me for a divorce. This happened just after he was promoted to department head. I had met Matt when I was a new college graduate and he was my senior colleague and mentor. Soon, I found out I was pregnant, and we decided to marry right away. I left my job to care for our daughter, Emma, who is now 22 and doing well in her career. I thought that once Emma was grown, Matt and I could finally enjoy our lives together, but that dream ended the day Matt came home with a distant look on his face. I had prepared a special dinner to celebrate his promotion, but when we sat down, he avoided my gaze. "We need to talk," he said seriously. My heart sank, but I tried to stay hopeful, thinking he wanted to discuss our future now that his career was stable. Maybe he would thank me for all the years of support, or even surprise me with a vacation, but instead, he said, "I want a divorce. I've fallen in love with someone else." I was shocked. I had supported him for years, raising Emma mostly on my own while he focused on his career. I believed him every time he said he was too busy with work dinners or business golf. I hadn't seen any signs of betrayal. My life had been centered around our family, and I thought I could rely on his loyalty, but instead, Matt left me for my best friend, and they both broke my trust. I struggled to rebuild my life, but Emma kept me going. Her strength and determination inspired me to move forward. Now, 2 years later, as I stood in front of them in the city, I felt calm. The man next to me, a kind and supportive partner, smiled as I introduced myself. My ex-husband and former friend looked uneasy, but I was unbothered. I had already reclaimed my life. I chose not to complain and had supported Matt behind the scenes. I had seen the challenges he faced after our unexpected pregnancy, and my decision to quit my job. One of Matt's superiors once said, "He's a rookie with a slow work pace, but he sure knows how to get a woman pregnant fast." That comment hurt us both, and not all our colleagues supported our decision to get married. Despite the judgment, Matt worked hard to prove himself. His dedication paid off with an early promotion to department head. I wanted to make sure his success reflected well on both of us, so I put in extra effort to choose thoughtful gifts for his bosses and their families. At company events, I smiled politely, even though I knew people judged me for leaving work early and stepping away from my career. I didn't mind. I did it all because I believed in him and wanted him to succeed. But instead of thanking me for my unwavering support, Matt betrayed me. Until the day he asked for a divorce, I never suspected he was having an affair. Was I foolish? Had I missed the signs? I had to know the truth, even if it hurt. "Who is she?" I asked, my voice shaking. Maybe it was just an infatuation, and he wasn't serious about ending our family. Matt hesitated before answering. "You know her. She's someone close to you." My mind raced. Could it be a former coworker or one of Emma's friends? That seemed too absurd. Could it be someone from the families we knew through Emma's activities, like swimming or ballet? But Matt barely participated in those events. "Just tell me," I said, trying to stay calm. He sighed and finally shouted, "It's Michelle." Michelle. The name hit me like a punch. Michelle had been my best friend since childhood, the one I trusted most. We shared everything, our joys, struggles, and even our families. When Matt and I got engaged, Michelle asked me to introduce her to one of Matt's friends. She later married him, and they had a daughter, Jessica, who was 3 years younger than Emma. Over the years, we bonded over parenting, barbecues, and shared advice. I never imagined she would betray me like this. Memories of Michelle flooded my mind. Once, when I was holding on to some of Emma's outgrown clothes, Michelle joked, "Holding on to these things is a sign of a toxic parent. It's just stuff. Sarah, you need to let go or you'll be that kind of mom." Her words stung, but I tried to be less sentimental. Later, I gave Michelle some of Emma's old clothes and toys, but there was one item I couldn't part with: Emma's preschool uniform. It held too many memories. I lied to Michelle, saying I might need it for another child. and asked her to return it once Jessica was done with it. Michelle's marriage didn't last. By the time Jessica was in kindergarten, Michelle and her husband divorced. When Michelle returned the preschool uniform, I was glad to have it back, even though it was worn and patched, but her words stung again. Must be nice to be a housewife, huh, Sarah? I'm still dating, but as a single parent, I can't give Jessica a sibling. At the time, Michelle hadn't shared the details of her marriage troubles. I empathized with her, but I was also dealing with my own disappointments. I had wanted a second child, but Matt's long hours and lack of interest made it impossible. I had let go of that dream, feeling grateful in some ways that I was better off than Michelle. But now, hearing Matt speak Michelle's name, the betrayal cut deep. The betrayal felt unbearable. Michelle, who once accused me of still dating my own husband, had stolen him from me. I remembered when she bitterly said, "The guy you introduced me to left me for another woman." At the time, I didn't deny it, I only smiled sympathetically. I never imagined she would do the same thing to me. After her divorce, Michelle picked a fight with me. It all started when she asked me to introduce her to someone I barely knew, her now ex-husband. When I first met him, Michelle was immediately drawn to his looks and made it her mission to pursue him. I had advised her to take things slow and really get to know him, but she didn't listen. Later, when her marriage fell apart, she blamed me. I was confused but tried to be sympathetic, recognizing that she needed a friend during a tough time. I didn't hold it against her. After her divorce, I did my best to support Michelle and her daughter, Jessica. I even became Jessica's emergency contact at her daycare. If Jessica got sick and Michelle couldn't leave work, I'd pick her up, take her to the doctor, and look after her until Michelle was free. I adjusted my part-time work schedule so I could be there for Jessica when she started middle school and needed somewhere to go after school. It wasn't easy, but I wanted to help. When my own daughter, Emma, graduated from elementary school and moved to middle school, my life changed. A clerk at my part-time job got married and moved away, and my company offered me a full-time position. Matt supported the idea of me increasing our household income, and Emma was on board too. After years of focusing on family, I was excited about this new chapter, but working full-time meant I couldn't keep looking after Jessica after school. Michelle and I had to adjust, and Jessica started coming home to an empty house, but I figured it wasn't my responsibility anymore. Life moved on. Over the next 9 years, Michelle and I saw each other less. Even though we didn't meet as often as we did when our daughters were young, I still considered her my best friend. Then, one day, Matt's unexpected words shattered that illusion. "I want a divorce. I'm in love with Michelle." His words hit me like a ton of bricks. I tried to laugh it off, thinking it was some kind of joke. "You're kidding, right? Michelle is my best friend." But Matt's expression was deadly serious. "I know she's your best friend, but I've fallen for her. I can't help how I feel." I stared at him, stunned. How could a 49-year-old man with a 22-year-old daughter speak so childishly? It felt like I was trapped in some absurd soap opera. I called Michelle for clarity, thinking maybe it was just Matt's crush, but when she answered, she didn't sound surprised. "I already know. Matt told me he wants a divorce today." I was in shock. "You knew?" I asked, my heart sinking. "Yes," Michelle said cheerfully. "I'm sorry, but Matt's in love with me. He wants to divorce you and marry me." The world seemed to spin. My husband and my best friend were conspiring together. It felt like a cruel joke. Matt left the room, muttering something about a smoke break, something he hadn't done since I was pregnant. When he returned, Michelle walked in beside him. "I'm really sorry," Matt said, but his words felt empty. "We've confirmed our feelings. Michelle is the right partner for me now." Michelle's smirk was unmistakable. I couldn't help myself. "Didn't you already have a boyfriend, Michelle? Weren't they the ones supporting you financially after your divorce?" Michelle's face hardened. "Don't bring that up in front of Matt," she snapped. "Those were just temporary. I've always loved Matt." She even faked tears, trying to put on a dramatic show. Matt reached out and stroked her hair tenderly. "Don't blame Michelle," he said softly, as if this betrayal was something I just had to accept. It felt unreal. Watching them, my heart shattered, and silent tears rolled down my face. "Since when?" I whispered. "We've been meeting in secret for a long time," Michelle admitted without shame, "but we only started talking about marriage after Matt's promotion was confirmed." I felt like a fool. I had trusted both of them, and now I saw how they'd been betraying me. Michelle must have seen Matt's promotion as her ticket to a better life, and now she was aiming for marriage. "Now that you know, hurry up and divorce him," she said with a smirk. Her attitude made my tears feel ridiculous. I forced myself to respond, "Fine, I'll divorce him," but then I couldn't help asking, "What about Jessica? Does she know?" "Don't ignore your daughter's feelings." Matt looked guilty for a moment but quickly dropped his gaze. "Jessica turned 18 and moved out. She's no longer my responsibility," he muttered. "It's probably your fault she turned out so defiant, considering how much time she spent with you." Their callousness was overwhelming. I hadn't even known Jessica had moved out. When Matt showed me the divorce papers, already signed by Michelle, I couldn't argue anymore. Seeing that ugly document, I agreed to the divorce on the spot. Matt packed his things and left to live with Michelle. The next day, when Emma returned from her business trip, I told her everything. Her reaction was sharper than I expected. "That man isn't my father anymore," she said firmly. "And Michelle? She's the worst person I've ever known." Her words startled me, but I saw how strong Emma had become. I was worried she'd be hurt, but she handled it better than I expected. Still, her anger was intense. "Have you talked to Jessica?" I asked, concerned she might be struggling. "Mom, stop worrying about other people," Emma said, her eyes full of tears. "Start thinking about yourself." Seeing her so raw and vulnerable made me realize she had suffered more than I knew. I hugged her, something we hadn't done in years. I promised to be a better parent, someone Emma could truly be proud of. 2 years passed without a word from Matt or Michelle. Emma thrived in her new independence, and we saw no reason to reach out to her father. Michelle had moved far away after marrying Matt, and our paths never crossed until one evening, by chance, after attending a play, I ran into them in the city. When our eyes met, I couldn't avoid them. Michelle sneered, "A poor-looking old man suits you." I didn't respond to her insult. Instead, I just enjoyed the evening with my new boyfriend, Jonathan. We'd been watching the play together. I gave Michelle a steady look. "Good to see you, Michelle. Don't you recognize him?" Michelle's smug expression faltered when she saw Jonathan, and she stared at him in disbelief. Matt looked just as surprised. "Wait, you're Jonathan?" he stammered. Jonathan had once been Matt's senior at work, mentoring him when Matt first started. He had taken the fall for a mistake Matt made, which cost Jonathan his job. I hadn't known that at the time, but we reconnected recently through a mutual friend and started dating. Michelle's face twisted as she recalled when I had introduced Jonathan to her as a potential partner. She had rejected him, saying he was too old and not stylish enough. Now, Jonathan looked different, more polished and refined. Michelle's shallow view had blinded her to his true value. Jonathan spoke calmly, "Relax, Michelle. It's not a big company, and my income isn't huge, but starting my own business worked out well." Michelle's eyes widened in horror. "He's a CEO," she exclaimed. "If I'd known that, I wouldn't have married Matt. He's so cheap." Her outburst made me feel sorry for her. Jonathan, always composed, shrugged. "It's not about titles, Michelle. It's about character." Just then, I noticed Emma and Jessica nearby, having overheard everything. I felt guilty, they shouldn't have had to witness this. But their faces were firm. "Still relying on men after all these years," Emma said, her voice sharp. "When will you ever learn?" Michelle turned, startled, and suddenly tried to act all motherly. "Jessica, Emma, how have you been?" But neither daughter was buying it. Jessica stood tall and spoke with quiet strength. "I loved you once, Mom. But after the divorce, you moved us around and dated random men. It made me uncomfortable and ashamed. I used to wish Miss Sarah was my mom." Her words cut deep, but I hugged her tightly, feeling a stronger bond than ever before. Jonathan spoke up, breaking the tension. "Come on, let's leave these foolish people behind and go get something to eat." We walked away, leaving Matt and Michelle behind in their hollow lives. Later, I heard from an old classmate that Matt and Michelle had divorced. Matt finally reached his breaking point after Michelle belittled him too many times. Emma and Jessica grew even closer, like true sisters. Jonathan eventually proposed, and I said yes. Looking back, I realized my first marriage was a mistake, but it led me to where I belong, together with Jonathan, Emma, and Jessica, building a new life filled with love and laughter.